Today, we are travelling on one of Scotland's most fascinating and underrated mainline railway journeys, aboard the legendary InterCity 225 from Glasgow Central to Edinburgh Waverley via Carstairs. For many railway enthusiasts, the route between Glasgow and Edinburgh usually means the busy main line via Falkirk High, but this journey is something very different. This is the long way round, a grand sweep southwards onto the famous West Coast main line before turning east at the historic junction of Carstairs and heading across the Scottish lowlands towards Edinburgh. And on a snowy winter's day aboard an InterCity 225, this route becomes something truly magical. The InterCity 225 remains one of Britain's most iconic high-speed trains. Introduced during the final great years of British Rail in the late 1980s, these trains transformed long-distance travel on the East Coast Main Line. The name 225 came from the train's designed top speed of 225 km per hour, 140 miles per hour, although signalling restrictions meant they normally operated at 125 miles per hour in service. Even today, decades later, they still carry an atmosphere of speed, comfort, and classic British railway engineering. Our journey begins beneath the vast iron and glass roof of Glasgow Central Station, one of the great railway cathedrals of Britain. Opened in 1879 by the Caledonian Railway, Glasgow Central quickly became the company's flagship station for services to England and the South. The station was expanded dramatically in the early 1900s as rail traffic exploded during the golden age of railway travel. Today it remains Scotland's busiest railway station and one of the most atmospheric anywhere in the United Kingdom. Standing here on the platform as snow falls outside the train shed roof, there is a wonderful sense of occasion. Electric trains hum quietly beneath the steel arches while departure boards flicker with destinations stretching across Scotland and beyond. Ahead of us waits the InterCity 225 set, sleek Mark IV coaches, streamlined design, and the unmistakable shape of the Class 91 locomotive. Even now, these trains still look futuristic despite being over 30 years old. As we pull away from Glasgow Central, the train glides over the famous Clyde bridges and immediately begins threading through the dense railway network of southern Glasgow. To our left and right are countless lines that once carried the immense industrial traffic of the city. Coal trains, steel trains, locomotive works, shipyard traffic. Glasgow was once one of the busiest railway centres anywhere in Europe. We pass Polmadie Depot, one of Scotland's most important railway maintenance centres. For decades, this area has echoed with the sound of locomotives being prepared for service. In British Rail days, classes such as the mighty Class 86s, Class 87s, and later the InterCity fleet all passed through here. As we continue southwards, the suburban landscape slowly begins to open out into the wider Scottish lowlands. Snow lies across rooftops, embankments and fields, transforming the landscape into a winter railway postcard. One of the great joys of travelling by train in winter is how the railway cuts through scenery inaccessible by road. From the comfort of the carriage window, we can see frozen fields, distant church towers, small villages and old industrial remains disappearing into the snowfall. Soon we approach Motherwell, one of Scotland's most important railway towns. Motherwell developed rapidly during the Industrial Revolution thanks to coal mining and steel production. The town became deeply connected with the railway industry, serving as a major junction on the West Coast Main Line and an important centre for freight traffic. The station itself has long been a key stopping point for Anglo-Scottish expresses. In the days of steam, this area witnessed some of the greatest locomotives ever built. LMS Pacifics, Coronation-class engines, Royal Scots, and later British Rail electric locomotives storming north and south beneath the wires. For railway enthusiasts, Motherwell remains a superb place for train spotting today, with freight, local services and long-distance expresses all sharing the route. South of Motherwell, the line begins to feel increasingly like a true main-line railway. The tracks stretch ahead through open countryside, while the InterCity 225 settles into its stride. There is something very special about high-speed electric rail travel in winter conditions. The train feels effortless, almost floating over the rails while snow swirls across the landscape outside. The West Coast Main Line itself is one of the most important railway routes in Britain, built gradually during the 19th century by several railway companies before becoming part of the London and North Western Railway and later the LMS. It eventually developed into Britain's premier railway artery, linking London, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool and Glasgow. The line north of Carlisle into Scotland was opened by the Caledonian Railway during the late 1840s, creating a direct Anglo-Scottish main line connection. Electrification arrived during the great modernisation schemes of British Rail in the 1970s. The completion of overhead electrification to Glasgow in 1974 dramatically reduced journey times and brought a completely new era of railway travel to Scotland. As our train races through the snowy countryside, it is impossible not to imagine the countless famous trains that have travelled this route over the decades. The Royal Scot, the Midday Scot, the Caledonian Expresses, InterCity electric services, PT Trials, Pendolinos. This railway has always represented speed, prestige, and the connection between Scotland and England. Ahead lies one of the most important railway junctions in Scotland, Carstairs. To many ordinary passengers, it may seem like a quiet rural station in the middle of nowhere, but for railway enthusiasts, Carstairs is legendary. This is where the West Coast Main Line divides. One route heads northwest towards Glasgow Central, while the other curves eastwards towards Edinburgh Waverley. For generations, trains were split and joined here, with portions heading for different Scottish cities. In the classic British Rail era, northbound sleeper and express services would arrive from London and be divided at Carstairs. One section continued to Glasgow, while another portion headed for Edinburgh, often involving complex locomotive changes and intricate railway operations. The station therefore became famous among railway enthusiasts for its unusual operations and strategic importance. As we pass through Carstairs Junction itself, the web of tracks and overhead wires spreads out across the snowy landscape. Signal gantries stand silhouetted against the winter sky, while distant freight lines disappear towards England. This is a wonderful place to simply watch trains. The atmosphere feels remote, windswept, and deeply connected to the history of the railway. Our InterCity 225 now leaves the main West Coast route and turns east towards Edinburgh. This section of line has a fascinating history of its own. The Glasgow to Edinburgh route via Carstairs originally formed part of the Caledonian Railway's ambitions to connect Scotland's two largest cities with England. The Edinburgh branch opened in 1848, while the Glasgow section followed in 1849. For many years, the route via Carstairs lost out to the faster and more direct line via Falkirk, but electrification in the late 1980s and early 1990s brought the route back into prominence. The electrification of the Edinburgh branch allowed InterCity 225 sets from the East Coast Main Line to reach Glasgow Central directly via Carstairs. That decision gave railway enthusiasts something truly unique. East Coast Main Line InterCity 225 trains operating into Glasgow Central on what was traditionally West Coast territory. Even today, the route feels unusual and slightly special compared with the more familiar Edinburgh to Glasgow lines. The scenery along this stretch is wonderfully atmospheric in winter. Rolling farmland, small villages, distant hills and isolated farms all pass by the carriage window beneath a blanket of snow. There is a peacefulness to this part of Scotland during winter. The railway cuts silently through the countryside, while the InterCity 225 glides beneath the overhead wires with barely a sound apart from the hum of electric traction. As we continue eastwards, we pass through stations such as Haymarket's outer approaches and smaller lowland communities that owe much of their existence to the railway age. Many of these villages expanded dramatically during the 19th century, once railways connected them to Glasgow and Edinburgh. Freight traffic, agriculture and passenger travel all flourished thanks to these lines. For railway photographers, this route offers countless beautiful locations, snow-covered embankments, sweeping curves, electric wires disappearing into the distance, and classic Scottish skies combine to create scenes that feel timeless. Few things look better than an InterCity train crossing the Scottish countryside in winter conditions. The InterCity 225 itself deserves enormous credit for helping modernise British rail travel. When introduced in 1989, the trains represented the very latest in British railway technology. They featured air-conditioned Mark IV coaches, smooth riding qualities, electric operation, and a level of comfort that transformed long-distance journeys. Passenger numbers on the East Coast Main Line increased significantly following their introduction. For many people, these trains symbolised the final great achievement of British rail before privatisation. Even now, they still carry a strong sense of nostalgia for the InterCity era, a time of swallow liveries, buffet cars, proper railway timetables, and some of the most elegant train branding Britain ever produced. As the outskirts of Edinburgh begin to appear, the line becomes busier with commuter traffic and suburban stations. Snow-covered housing estates spread across the hillsides, while the skyline of Scotland's capital slowly emerges ahead. Approaching Edinburgh by rail is always a spectacular experience. The city suddenly appears dramatically among hills, historic buildings and bridges before the train descends into the deep cutting leading towards Waverley Station. And then comes one of the great arrivals anywhere in Britain, Edinburgh Waverley. Named after the novels of Sir Walter Scott, Waverley sits in the heart of the city between the medieval Old Town and the Georgian New Town. Few railway stations anywhere in the world can rival its setting. As our InterCity 225 curves beneath the great station roof, Edinburgh Castle towers above the skyline, while the historic architecture of the city surrounds the railway on all sides. For over 150 years, trains have arrived here carrying passengers from across Britain. Steam expresses, sleeping cars, InterCity trains, HSTs and electric locomotives have all passed beneath these famous glass roofs. There is something wonderfully dramatic about arriving in Edinburgh by train during snowy weather. The station lights reflect against the wet rails, while the city beyond seems wrapped in winter atmosphere. And after travelling the route via Carstairs aboard an InterCity 225, it is difficult not to feel that this is one of Britain's truly underrated railway journeys. It combines the grandeur of the West Coast Main Line, the history of the Caledonian Railway, the rarity of InterCity 225 operation into Glasgow Central, and some truly beautiful Scottish scenery along the way. For railway enthusiasts, this route offers almost everything. Historic mainline railway, famous junctions, classic stations, electric traction, winter scenery, British rail nostalgia, and one of Britain's greatest ever train designs. Whether you are interested in railway history, scenic journeys, classic British rail operations, or simply enjoying a relaxing winter train ride through Scotland, the Glasgow Central to Edinburgh route via Carstairs is a journey that deserves to be experienced at least once. And thank you very much for watching and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed this snowy journey aboard the legendary InterCity 225, please like, share and subscribe for more railway journeys, railway history, archive footage, cab rides and classic British rail action from across Britain and beyond. And let us know in the comments, have you ever travelled via Carstairs? And what is your favourite railway journey in Scotland? Thank you very much for watching and joining us on this wonderful snowy journey aboard the legendary InterCity 225 from Glasgow Central to Edinburgh via Carstairs. We hope you've enjoyed experiencing one of Scotland's most fascinating mainline railway journeys, from the great stations and historic junctions to the stunning winter scenery of the Scottish lowlands. If you did enjoy the video, please help support the channel by liking, sharing and subscribing. It really does help the channel grow and allows us to continue bringing you more railway journeys, railway history, archive footage and classic British rail action from across the UK and beyond. Don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know your favourite Scottish railway journey or your memories of travelling aboard the InterCity 225. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again very soon for another railway adventure.